The sun was just starting to dip beyond the horizon when I found out that everything I believed in, trusted in, loved, was a lie. In that quiet hour, I was in my hospital bed, too weak to move, recovering from a surgery that left me questioning if I'd make it through the month. With every shallow breath, I clung to the hope of home, of Hannah's warm embrace, of seeing my son, Kyle, growing up. But just when I thought my heart couldn't bear the strain any longer, I heard the door creak open. Hannah's voice, the familiar lilt of it, reached my ears. Relief washed over me for a moment, but then, another voice, a man's voice, responded. His chuckle was low, comfortable, too close to her. I strained my eyes open, catching their silhouettes just outside the door to my room. They stood close, too close, her hand grazing his arm, his fingers brushing her waist as if they'd done it 1,000 times before. And then she said, with an indifference that cut deep, "You know, he's not going to be around much longer. No need to pretend anymore." My breath caught, my heartbeat spiking, thundering so loud I thought it would give me away. But they didn't notice. They were too wrapped up in each other, in a world where I was already buried, dead and forgotten. "Won't he find out?" the man asked, his tone tinged with the smallest hint of doubt. I wanted to scream, to break free, to demand answers, but my body was a cage, holding me prisoner to this nightmare. "No," Hannah replied, laughing softly. "He's practically on his deathbed already. I don't see the point in hiding my affairs anymore." That sentence hit me like a gut punch, every word a jagged knife twisting through my chest. Affairs. Plural. This wasn't a one-time fling. This was planned, chosen, multiple betrayals while I lay there fighting for life. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone, who I had shared everything with, had turned her back on me in the most callous way. A flood of memories surged through me. Every time she'd looked me in the eye, every word of comfort she'd given me in my weakest moments. Every damn time she said she'd be there, no matter what, echoed back now, twisted, corrupted, a mockery of love. I lay there, frozen, unsure what to do, unable to think. The betrayal stung, but it was her complete lack of remorse, the casual cruelty, that broke something deep within me. The woman I'd loved was a stranger, someone with a heart so cold she could stand there, a few feet away, and openly discuss my death as if it were a mere inconvenience in her life. Finally, the man, Nathan, I remembered she called him, nodded, and they both turned away. Their laughter faded down the hall, but it left an imprint, a scar that wouldn't fade. In the dim light of that hospital room, I knew I could never go back to the way things were. And I knew one other thing would survive, not just for me, but to make sure she didn't get away with what she'd done. For a moment, weakness threatened to overtake me, the dizzying mix of pain and betrayal pressing down hard. But the anger, the pure, raw anger, was a powerful medicine, and it fueled me to stay awake, to stay aware, to stay alive. The next morning, as the first light peeked through the hospital window, I lay still, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with 100 thoughts, each one tangling into the other, and every single one leading back to Hannah. To what she had done. To her laugh, her casual dismissal of my life as nothing more than an inconvenient delay in her sordid affair. I couldn't shake that moment. I couldn't erase the image of her with that man, the way she looked at him, the warmth and comfort I hadn't seen from her in months. Suddenly, 1,000 things that I had dismissed as simple changes in behavior felt like glaring red flags. Her growing distance, the long silences, the way she'd brush off my questions with a hint of irritation or avoid eye contact altogether. When she'd visit me in the hospital, there was a hollowness in her words, a subtle shift that felt out of place. But I told myself I was just imagining it. That she was dealing with the stress of my illness, of having to shoulder the burden of our home and Kyle all by herself. I wanted so badly to believe that she was just as committed to us as I was. I held on to that faith, even when my gut told me something was off. But now it was clear. Her silence, her impatience, even the way she'd quickly change out of my sight after getting home, it all made sense. She had been with him. With them, apparently. I didn't know if it was one man or more, but at that moment, it didn't matter. She had shattered my trust, turned everything we'd built into ashes. Later that day, she arrived. I heard her footsteps before I saw her face. I lay there, pretending to be asleep, not yet ready to face her, not while every fiber of my being screamed with anger, betrayal, and a vengeance I'd never known I was capable of. She slipped into the room with the same fake smile she wore so well, that practiced look of concern plastered across her face. She approached the bed, gently touched my hand, and sighed. "Oh, honey, how are you feeling today?" Her voice was soft, sweet, too sweet, knowing what I now knew. I opened my eyes slowly, feigning a look of exhaustion while fighting the urge to grab her hand and rip off that mask. I forced a weak smile, playing my part. "Hanging in there," I murmured, watching her face for any hint of guilt, any sign that might reveal her betrayal. But she was good. So damn good at lying. She adjusted the blanket around my shoulders, her movements as tender and gentle as they'd always been, and yet now they felt like daggers. "You know, Kyle is missing you so much," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's looking forward to you coming home." Coming home. My stomach twisted at the thought. How could I return to a place so tainted by her lies? The home we built together, where she now wove her affairs in secret, under the same roof where my son lived, our son. The thought of her bringing another man there made me sick. "How's everything been at home?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I wanted to see if she'd admit to anything, to see if there was an ounce of honesty left in her. I waited, hoping she'd stumble, hoping for the slightest flicker of guilt. But instead, she tilted her head, her face perfectly composed. "Oh, it's been hard, you know," she said with a sigh, squeezing my hand in that practiced, comforting way she had. "But Nathan has been a huge help." Nathan. Hearing his name from her lips nearly drove me over the edge, but I swallowed the anger, forcing myself to keep it hidden, to play along. "Who's Nathan?" I asked, playing dumb, searching her face, hoping to catch even the smallest slip. She smiled that smooth, easy smile that only a true deceiver could wear. "Oh, he's just a friend," she replied, her tone casual. "He's been helping with some of the things around the house. You know, taking care of things while you're here. Just a friend." She said it with such confidence, her eyes steady, her voice smooth as silk. If I hadn't overheard her with my own ears, I might have believed her. She was so damn convincing. I nodded, forcing a look of gratitude on my face. "That's good," I murmured, trying to keep the fury from my voice. "I appreciate the help." "Oh, of course," she cooed, patting my hand as if I were a child. "Anything to make things easier for you. Just focus on getting better, all right?" I lay there, nodding, hiding the storm building inside me. Every touch of her hand, every word from her lips felt like poison. I knew I couldn't confront her here, not while I was still weak, still dependent on her. I had to play the part, to gather my strength, to find a way to get to the bottom of this. But as she talked about the friend who had been so helpful, I knew I couldn't let her walk away without knowing she was being watched. I would make her pay, one way or another. I held my anger in check, but just barely. The days blurred together in a haze of quiet rage and forced patience as I waited to regain my strength. Hannah kept visiting, talking about mundane things, keeping up her charade as if I were still her clueless husband, too weak to understand what was happening right in front of me. And every time she left, I'd lie there, clenching my fists, waiting for the day I could finally stand on my own 2 feet again. After a week of physical therapy, I could finally get around without the assistance of a nurse. My body was healing, but my mind was sharpened by the betrayal, by the storm brewing inside me. I felt myself growing stronger, and with each step, I was one step closer to confronting her, to tearing down her web of lies. Then, one evening, just as I was packing my things to go home, I heard Hannah's voice in the hallway, softer this time. Curious, I crept closer to the door, straining to listen. I heard her talking on the phone, her tone laced with the kind of warmth she hadn't used with me in months. "I'm coming over as soon as I leave here," she whispered, giggling softly. "I can't wait to see you." Her voice dropped even lower, almost a purr, and I felt bile rise in my throat. I couldn't hear everything she said, but I heard enough. Enough to know she wasn't just with him, she was eager to be with him, excited to get out of the hospital and into his arms. The moment she walked back into my room, all smiles and sweetness, I looked her dead in the eye. "I think I'm ready to come home tomorrow," I said, watching her reaction closely. For the briefest second, a flicker of something crossed her face. Worry? Annoyance? It was hard to tell, but it was there. She quickly recovered, her smile widening. "That's wonderful," she said, a bit too brightly. "I know Kyle will be so happy to see you." I nodded, pretending to go along with her excitement. "Yes," I said slowly, "I can't wait to be home. And I want us to spend some real time together, Hannah. Just you and me." Again, that flicker of something I couldn't quite place, but she quickly masked it with another one of those dazzling smiles. "Of course," she said, touching my arm. "I'm here for whatever you need." The next day, she drove me home. I watched her hands grip the wheel, her knuckles white as she tried to play the part of a supportive wife. As we pulled up to the house, she helped me out of the car, fussing over me, but all I could see was the way her eyes darted around, as if she were anxious, worried. Once inside, Kyle rushed to me, throwing his arms around me, his little face lit up with joy. For a moment, my anger softened. I held him tightly, savoring the warmth of his hug, the pure innocence of his love. But the moment was fleeting. The second I looked over his shoulder and saw her watching us, my rage returned with a vengeance. Later that night, as Kyle slept soundly in his room, I lay awake in our bed beside her, feeling every inch between us like a chasm filled with lies. She lay there, pretending to sleep, but her breathing was too even, too controlled. I could sense she was waiting, counting down the minutes until I drifted off so she could get up and go. Where? To him? To whatever hidden life she had stashed away. I decided it was time to get some answers. Rolling over to face her, I spoke quietly, almost too softly. "Hannah?" She shifted slightly, turning towards me, her face barely visible in the dim light. Are you happy?" I asked, my voice low, a strange calmness settling over me. She blinked, her eyes flickering in confusion. "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" I studied her face, searching for any sign of guilt or remorse. "Because, something feels different," I said slowly, measuring every word. "You've been acting distant. And I wonder if there's something you're not telling me." She tensed beside me, her smile slipping ever so slightly. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone defensive, even annoyed. "I've been doing everything I can to help you. You don't think I've been supportive?" "Oh, you've been supportive," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "But I think there's something more. Something you haven't been honest about." She went silent, her face hardening, and for a second, I thought I'd caught her. But then, with a flick of her hair and a roll of her eyes, she laughed. Actually laughed. "You're just paranoid," she said dismissively, turning her back to me. "You've been through a lot, and I get it, you're probably just emotional. But don't try to turn this into something it's not." Every word she spat felt like gasoline on an open flame. She wasn't just lying, she was insulting my intelligence, belittling me, pushing me to question my own sanity. And yet, she said it all so effortlessly, as if she truly believed she could twist my thoughts around her finger. But I wasn't going to let her. I'd had enough of her games, her deceit, her manipulation. She could play her part as well as she wanted, but I had finally seen behind the curtain. I knew the truth. And now, it was only a matter of time before I'd get her to admit it. I lay back, pretending to give up, to let her think she'd won this round. But as she drifted off to sleep, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her outright, not yet. I needed more than a gut feeling, I needed proof, something undeniable that would expose her completely. So I began to plan. Quietly, carefully, I would uncover the life she thought she'd hidden so well. And when I had what I needed, I would make her face every lie, every betrayal, every twisted game she thought she could get away with. And I would not let her escape this time. The following days were a masterclass in restraint. I wore the mask of the oblivious husband, the one she thought she had under her thumb. She had no idea I was observing her every move, picking up on the smallest details, noting each phone call she took in hushed tones, each text she hastily replied to while glancing over her shoulder. I started my own quiet investigation. While she was out one morning, I rummaged through her closet and drawers, searching for anything that would confirm my suspicions. Her phone, as expected, was practically glued to her hand, never left unattended, so I didn't bother with it. Instead, I checked her bags, her purses, even the pockets of her coats. Then, in the pocket of her winter coat, I found it, a receipt from a luxury hotel downtown, a place she'd never mentioned going to. The date on the receipt was from 2 weeks ago, while I was still in the hospital, fighting for my life. The name on the receipt was hers, but it showed she'd paid for 2 people. Room service for 2, a bottle of champagne, an assortment of desserts. She'd been living it up with him, celebrating what she must have thought was my inevitable decline. A surge of anger boiled up, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was it. The confirmation I needed. I wasn't crazy. She had been unfaithful, and the proof was right here in my hands. But still, I wanted more. I wanted something that would leave her no room to maneuver, something so undeniable that she couldn't laugh it off or twist it around. The next night, as she lay asleep beside me, I felt my mind racing, unable to quiet the anger simmering in my veins. I knew I couldn't keep waiting forever. It was time to make her face what she'd done, and I was ready for whatever excuses or twisted justifications she would throw my way. The following evening, I told her I wanted to go out for dinner, just the 2 of us. She seemed surprised but quickly agreed, a hint of relief in her eyes, as if she thought maybe I was still the clueless fool she took me for. We went to a quiet restaurant, dimly lit, with the kind of intimacy that used to mean something to us. Sitting across from her, watching her sip her wine, I felt both disgust and pity. She thought she was still in control, still holding all the cards. Halfway through the meal, I couldn't keep the pretense anymore. I leaned forward, fixing my gaze on her. "Hannah," I began, my voice steady, "I know about the hotel." Her face blanched, but she quickly recovered, trying to play it cool. "What are you talking about?" she asked, an edge of annoyance in her voice. "You heard me," I said, keeping my tone even. "The hotel. The champagne. The room service for 2. I found the receipt in your coat." Her expression faltered, her mouth opening and closing as if scrambling for words. No, that was for a work thing. I had a colleague from out of town, and—" "Stop lying, Hannah," I interrupted, the anger finally seeping through my voice. "I overheard you in the hospital. You brought him into our home, and you said you didn't see a point in hiding it anymore because I was going to die soon anyway. Do you remember saying that?" The color drained from her face. For once, she had no practiced smile, no rehearsed lines. Her jaw tightened, and her eyes darted around the restaurant, as if searching for an escape. When she finally spoke, her voice was icy. "So what if I did?" she spat, her tone venomous. "Do you think I wanted to spend my life as your nurse, taking care of you day and night? Do you think that's what I signed up for? You got sick, and everything changed. I had needs, too. I wasn't going to put my life on hold for you. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. But I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my voice steady, though every fiber of my being wanted to shout, to scream. So you decided to betray me, I said, barely holding back the bitterness in my voice. You decided to take everything we built and throw it away because life got hard? She rolled her eyes, her expression hardened. Please, she scoffed. Don't act like we were some perfect couple. You were so focused on your work before you got sick, I barely even existed to you. And when you finally had time for me, it was because you couldn't do anything else. And now I'm supposed to give up my life, my happiness, to play the dutiful wife while you wither away? Her words, twisted and cruel, felt like acid on an open wound. I sat there, stunned by the depth of her selfishness, by her complete lack of remorse. It was as if I was seeing her true face for the first time, a person so devoid of empathy, so consumed by her own desires, that she could justify betraying me in the worst way possible. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process the reality before me. I'd known she'd lied, that she'd betrayed me. But this was another level. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was heartless. Fine, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. You've made your choice. I'll make mine. She raised an eyebrow, a sneer tugging at her lips. Oh? And what's that? Divorce, I replied, feeling the word settle like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I'm done. You've made it clear where you stand, and I don't want to waste another second on someone who doesn't care if I live or die. For a moment, she looked taken aback, as if she hadn't expected me to take such a definitive stand. But then, her expression shifted, a cold smile spreading across her face. Good, she said, her tone mocking. Finally, you're doing something right. Just make sure you don't screw that up, too. Her words lingered in the air, sharp and biting, as I stood up from the table, leaving her there without another word. I walked out of the restaurant, feeling a strange, quiet relief wash over me. The anger, the pain, the betrayal, they were still there, but now they were accompanied by a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. She was no longer my problem. No longer my burden to bear. And for the first time, I realized that I would be okay, that I could walk away from this shattered life and rebuild something new, something better, without her. And as I drove home alone that night, I knew I'd finally taken the first step toward freedom. As I drove away from the restaurant, a new kind of resolve took root within me. I wasn't going to walk away quietly, leaving her with everything and pretending as though she hadn't betrayed me in the most humiliating way possible. No. Hannah needed to feel the consequences of her actions, and I was going to make sure both she and her lover knew exactly what it felt like to be utterly betrayed and exposed. For the next few days, I kept up the facade, pretending I was moving forward with the divorce amicably. But beneath that surface, I began crafting my plan, gathering every piece of evidence I could find, documenting her texts, the receipt from the hotel, and even screenshots of her calls to Nathan. Every bit of it went into a file I started building in secret, preparing to use it to dismantle her comfortable life piece by piece. Then, I hired a private investigator. If Hannah thought she could be sly, I was going to show her what real subtlety looked like. Within a week, the investigator had gathered a wealth of incriminating photos and documents, proving beyond a doubt that her affair with Nathan wasn't a one-time thing. They had been meeting for months, spending time in the same hotel, sneaking around like two thieves in the night. But now, I held every piece of proof in my hands. One night, when Hannah thought I was at a lawyer's office, I arranged a meeting with Nathan. I knew he worked at a downtown law firm, one that took pride in its image as a respectable, family-oriented establishment. Nathan didn't know me, and I wanted to keep it that way until I was ready. With a copy of all the evidence tucked under my arm, I walked into his office under the pretense of wanting to discuss a legal matter. When I finally sat across from him, face to face with the man who had slipped into my home, my bed, my life, he barely even recognized the tension in the air. I let him start talking, acting the part of a curious client, and watched him for a few minutes. His polished mannerisms, his smug attitude, the subtle arrogance that radiated from him, it was enough to make my skin crawl. Finally, I slid a folder across the table and leaned in. "I think you'll find this quite interesting, Nathan." He looked at me, confused, and opened the folder. The moment he saw the photographs, of him with Hannah, in hotel rooms, in our home, his face drained of color. He stammered, trying to find words, but I kept my expression cold, unflinching. "Surprised?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't think she'd get caught, did you?" Nathan tried to compose himself, putting on that lawyerly bravado, but it didn't take. He knew I had him cornered. "What do you want?" he finally muttered, his eyes darting between me and the damning evidence. "Oh, don't worry, I don't want anything from you, yet," I replied, allowing a small smile to cross my face. "But here's what's going to happen. You're going to end whatever you think you have with Hannah. And then, you're going to have a long, awkward conversation with your boss about your conduct outside of work, because I've already sent a copy of this to him." He looked stricken, like a man whose world had suddenly crumbled before him. You can't do that," he stammered. "Oh, I already did," I said, enjoying his panic. "And by the way, I also sent copies to your wife." The shock in his eyes was priceless. He had no idea I knew about his family, about the perfect little image he'd been trying to maintain. But I'd done my research. He had a wife and 2 young children, all of whom were blissfully unaware of his double life. But now, his wife would know everything. He slumped back in his chair, defeated, and I stood up, gathering my things. "Enjoy explaining this to her," I said coldly. "And trust me, if I ever find out you're near my family again, I'll make sure this goes public." As I left his office, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. But I wasn't finished yet. Hannah still had to face the music, and I was going to make sure it hurt. That evening, I invited Hannah to dinner at home. She seemed pleased, almost smug, thinking I was finally accepting the divorce on her terms. But I had one more trick up my sleeve. While she was busy upstairs, I set up my laptop, connecting it to the TV, and queued up a slideshow with all the evidence I had gathered, photos, texts, even recorded calls from Nathan. When she came down and saw the setup, she looked confused. "What's all this?" she asked, giving me that fake smile she thought would still work on me. "Take a seat," I said, motioning to the couch. "There's something I think you'll want to see." She sat down, her brow furrowing as she glanced at the screen. I pressed play, and the photos began to flicker across the screen, each one more damning than the last. Her face turned from confusion to horror, then quickly to anger as she realized what I was doing. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Oh, it's just a little show and tell," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "This is every lie you told me, every time you betrayed me. It's all here. And I've already sent copies to the divorce lawyer, so don't think you'll be walking away with anything more than the clothes on your back." Her face contorted with rage. "You can't do this to me," she shouted, standing up, her fists clenched. "Oh, I can and I have," I said calmly. "And there's one more thing." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a letter, a formal notification that I was seeking full custody of Kyle. "This is what happens when you put your needs above our family." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw fear there. Real, unmistakable fear. She had thought she'd walk away from this unscathed, free to live her life without consequence. But now, she knew that her decisions had destroyed everything she thought she had. She stormed out of the house that night, but I wasn't worried. My lawyer had everything they needed to ensure she wouldn't take Kyle from me. She would get nothing but the consequences of her actions. As I stood alone in the house, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't just relief, it was freedom. Freedom from her lies, her betrayal, her cruelty. I knew it would take time to heal, to put everything behind me, but now I could start fresh, rebuild for myself and my son, without the shadow of her deception looming over us. And as I locked the door, shutting out the remnants of the life I'd left behind, I knew one thing for certain: she would never forget what I'd done. And neither would I. The next few weeks felt like a breath of fresh air. With Hannah out of the house and the divorce proceedings underway, I began to reclaim my life. I focused on Kyle, on rebuilding a stable and happy environment for him, and on rediscovering the man I had been before Hannah's lies and betrayal had torn me apart. But as satisfying as it was to see her lies unravel in court, there was still a fire burning inside me, a desire for closure, for something that felt more definitive than just legal victories. One day, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, and a woman's voice on the other end introduced herself as Emily, Nathan's now ex-wife. My stomach clenched, but her voice held no hostility. Instead, she sounded weary, wounded, but also curious. "I heard what you did," she said, a hint of admiration in her tone. "I wanted to meet you. I think we might have some things to discuss." Intrigued, I agreed to meet her for coffee. When I arrived, I found her already seated, her posture poised, her expression calm yet fierce. She was, in a way, the embodiment of dignity amid chaos, and as we sat across from each other, I felt a strange sense of kinship. "You're a hard man to track down," she began, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "But I had to thank you. If it weren't for what you did, I'd still be in the dark about Nathan's affair. Now I know the truth, and it's liberating, in a way." I nodded, feeling a pang of sympathy for her. "I'm sorry for everything you've gone through," I replied. "I didn't know about you until I started digging. And by the time I found out, I knew I couldn't let him keep getting away with it." She gave a small, bitter smile. "No apologies needed. You did what I should have done a long time ago." We sat in silence for a moment, and then she leaned forward, her voice low. "You know, Nathan is still trying to put his life back together. He's been groveling at his boss's feet, trying to save his reputation. But I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd be interested in a little collaboration." Her eyes glinted with a hint of mischief, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of excitement. She leaned in, outlining her idea in hushed tones, a plan that would give both Hannah and Nathan a taste of what betrayal felt like. A few days later, Emily and I put our plan into motion. Nathan was hosting a fundraiser at his law firm, an event intended to rebuild his shattered image. Emily and I decided it would be the perfect stage for the final act. The night of the event, I arrived dressed in my best suit, blending into the crowd of well-dressed professionals. Emily was already there, charming the guests with her poise and grace, her presence flawless and composed. We shared a subtle nod across the room, and then we each took our places for the grand finale. When Nathan finally took to the stage, his face the picture of confidence as he addressed the crowd, Emily's voice broke through the microphone with chilling clarity. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice calm but dripping with contempt. "Before you applaud this man for his supposed integrity, let me share a story. A story about a husband who destroyed his family for his own selfish desires." The room fell silent, all eyes on her, and Nathan's face went pale. His gaze met mine for the briefest moment, realizing I was there, that this wasn't a coincidence. And then, the slideshow began. Photos of him with Hannah flashed across the screen, each one painting a vivid picture of his infidelity. Gasps echoed through the crowd, a murmur of shocked whispers filling the air as Nathan stood frozen, his life unraveling before his colleagues, his friends, his entire world. When Emily finished, she gave him one last, searing look before turning to leave. The crowd parted around her, some still murmuring in disbelief, others glaring at Nathan with barely concealed disgust. I followed her outside, the cool night air filling my lungs with a renewed sense of freedom. As she walked away, she turned back to me with a small, victorious smile. "Thank you," she said simply, and with that, she disappeared into the night. The next day, I filed the final papers for the divorce, and by the end of the month, Hannah's hold over me was nothing but a memory. I had my life back, my dignity, and my son. And as for Hannah and Nathan, they were left to pick up the pieces of the lives they'd carelessly destroyed. Months passed, and I rebuilt, piece by piece. I threw myself into being the best father to Kyle, giving him the love and stability he deserved. And as I looked back on everything that had happened, I knew one thing for certain: I had emerged from the wreckage stronger, wiser, and ready to live a life free from deception. The scars of betrayal were there, sure. But they were marks of survival, reminders of a strength I never knew I had. And as I looked forward, I knew I would never let anyone betray me like that again. Here's the hard truth about betrayal: it changes you, but that change doesn't have to define you. If you're going through something similar, here are a few pieces of advice that may help you find clarity and peace on your journey forward. Trust your instincts. Don't ignore that gut feeling. If something feels off, pay attention. Trusting yourself is the first step to reclaiming your power. Sometimes, we brush off the little signs, telling ourselves we're just being paranoid, but if your gut is telling you something, there's a reason. Gather your strength, quietly. Betrayal can bring out anger, sadness, even a desire for revenge, and these emotions can be overwhelming. But acting impulsively will only cloud your judgment. Instead, take your time. Breathe. Gather yourself, get the information you need, and be strategic with how you proceed. Move with intention. Seek evidence before confrontation. If you're going to confront someone about betrayal, having undeniable evidence not only gives you confidence but also prevents them from gaslighting you. Knowing the truth empowers you to make informed decisions instead of relying on half-truths or excuses. Protect what matters to you most. People who betray others often look out for themselves first, leaving you vulnerable. Whether it's your kids, your financial security, or your emotional well-being, make protecting yourself and what you love your top priority. Get the right support, legally, financially, emotionally, so you're not left picking up the pieces alone. Do not give in to hatred. It's natural to feel hatred after betrayal, but letting that hatred consume you only chains you to the pain. Use that energy to rebuild yourself. It's okay to feel it, but don't let it define you. Letting go of hatred will eventually open the door to freedom and peace. Rebuild on your own terms. The end of any relationship, especially one marked by betrayal, can feel like the end of your world. But remember, it's a new beginning. Take the time to reconnect with yourself. Do the things you love, build a life that makes you feel whole, and focus on what makes you strong and resilient. The greatest revenge, after all, is living well. Find support and move forward with dignity. This isn't a journey you have to walk alone. Lean on friends, family, or a therapist who can provide perspective and guidance. Make sure your actions are aligned with your values, so when you look back, you can be proud of how you handled the situation. Betrayal may break you momentarily, but it also gives you the chance to rebuild into someone even stronger, wiser, and more grounded in your own worth. Take your time, trust yourself, and remember that the best revenge is not in getting even but in finding peace and happiness beyond the pain.